Okay, good morning, members of the Transportation Policy Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway and give it to the MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are now available from MAG staff. And before we begin, I'd like to welcome Councilmember John Edwards as the representative for the City of Peoria. Welcome, Councilmember Edwards. We look forward to your participation. He is not here, and I don't think he's online. I think he's already so it's one absence, then we can note. We'll now begin with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Transportation Policy Committee. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. David Barry. Councilmember Butler. Jen Daniels. Doug DeCluson. Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Gallego.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Giles.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Littlefield. Vice Mayor Littlefield. Cheryl Lombard. Councilmember Manfredi.
Here.
Thank you. Roy Miller.
Here.
Thank you. Chair Osborne.
Present.
Thank you. Tyler Pace. Mayor Peterson. Here. Thank you. Mark Reardon. Supervisor Sellers. Councilmember Stewart.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Stipp.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Wires. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wheatley. Mayor Woods. Is there anyone I have missed?
I was late. Board Member Daniels.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Item number 2 is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mayor Ken Weiss.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Our next item is call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda, informational items, or items on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Note that agenda item number 4 contains informational items which have been moved from the consent agenda, and public comments on any of these items may be offered during the call to the audience. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience unless the chair requests an exception to this limit. And I have one request to speak card for the call to the audience. And that first member is Andrew Marwick.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Osborne. Heat record after heat record has been getting smashed in recent years. The most 110 degree days, most 115 degree days, most nights over 90 degrees. This year, a new category, most nights over 95 degrees. This week, several more record warm nights. This morning and yesterday morning broke the record high minimum temperature by 5 degrees for records going back to 1895. And several more of those are probably on the way the rest of this week. The Phoenix heat island is out of control. Urban sprawl in Maricopa County and Pinal County is out of control. Poor air quality is out of control. Proposition 400 has funding for freeways on the fringe going halfway to Tucson through Pinal County. Highway 24, Highway 30 out to the west end of Buckeye. This will make the air quality, the heat island, and urban sprawl much worse than it is today. If this passes and these freeways are built, I don't want to see what this area is going to look like 20 or 30 years from now. The other things wrong with Proposition 400, the ban on using regional funding for rail projects. There was nothing in commuter rail in Proposition 400 20 years ago. This pushed it past 2050 before commuter rail could be a possibility in this a city of what will be then 8 or 9 million probably, no commuter rail at all. Another problem with it is there's a ban on speed limits under 65 miles an hour on the regional freeway system. That really, even if the traffic and crash data indicates that 65 is not safe, the speed limit will have to be at least 65 miles an hour. Voters should reject the Proposition 400 extension. Phoenix is a low-density metro area and there are many opportunities for infill development. About 50% of the regional population sales tax are in Phoenix, Tempe, and 2 other inner ring cities. If Proposition 400 is rejected, these cities can set their own transportation priorities without restrictions imposed by the state legislature from outside Maricopa County. The Sonoran Desert will set its own priorities, and the same fate the Hohokams met may be waiting if we ignore the consequences of this endless sprawl.
Thank you, Mr. Marwick. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. Staff, have we received any online written comments for the call to the audience?
Thank you, Chair. We have received 4 written comments for the call to the audience agenda item, which has been provided to the members in advance of the meeting for consideration.
Okay, fantastic. We're on to agenda item 4, informational items. Items 4A and 4B are for information only. Does any member of the committee have any questions or request a presentation on any of these items? I'm hearing none. The next, let's see. The next is agenda item number 5, approval of the consent agenda. So our next item is the approval of the consent agenda. Items 5A through 5D are on the consent agenda. Does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Okay, prior to the approval of the consent agenda, there is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any item on the consent agenda. I do not have any speaker request cards for the consent agenda items. Has staff have received any online written comments for the consent agenda?
Thank you, Chair. We did not receive any written comments for this item or any other item on today's agenda.
Okay, and we have, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting this. Councilmember or Mayor Morris from Mayor Morris, right? Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sorry about that. From Cave Creek, interested in what is on the consent agenda. Would you like to make any comments? Okay, great. Thank you. All right, well, thank you for being here. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items 5A through 5D?
I will make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Second. I have a motion from Mayor Weiss, a second from Councilmember Stipp. We'll have those participating in the meeting online now take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. We need to see the faces of everyone to participate in the voice vote. This is to speed up the voting process. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their camera, staff will conduct a roll call. Only call on those virtual participants who do not turn on their camera. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And those opposed, say nay. All right, members, please have your cameras on. Staff, can you take a call vote of the members participating virtually who did not turn on their camera?
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Mayor Hall?
Aye.
Thank you. Chair,
All right, thank you very much. All right, on to 6 items to be heard. Update on electrification readiness. And item number 6 is on the agenda for information and discussion. Ed, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request, actually a couple months ago. I believe Mayor Weiss asked for some updates on electrification and the status of the grid. Mayor Morris, in my conversations with him from Cave Creek, though not on TPC, also expressed interest, and we thought following up on the electrification strategic plan, it would be good to bring representatives of our electric utilities here. And this month, SRP has come to speak, and Audra Kester Thomas, who shepherded the electrification strategy through, will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Ed. Chairman, members of Transportation Policy Committee, pleased to be with you here today to introduce our guest speaker. As you'll recall, in September, this body unanimously recommended acceptance of the MAG Regional Electrification Readiness Strategic Plan. That was a directive of MAG Regional Council, not only to prepare for an increasingly electric future, notably associated with electric vehicles, but also our burgeoning and emerging technologies here in our economic development portfolio, in addition to obviously being ready and preparing our member agencies who are interested in chasing discretionary funding made available through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. At the time, Chairman Osborne, Mayor Weiss, and others indicated their interest in hearing more from our utilities who were partners in that strategic plan effort, particularly as it relates to their future strategies and projected increases in demand and how they are going to be addressing those issues. So acknowledging that SRP is not covering our entirety of our region and our service area, as mentioned, we plan to be bringing back APS early in the new year for a presentation as well. But today, are pleased that Burl Kilmer of the Salt River Project will be joining you in presenting an update today. Mr. Kilmer is SRP's manager of electric vehicle strategy and participated, as mentioned, in the development of the strategic plan. Before coming to SRP, Mr. Kilmer was engaged in regional partnership work in the greater Washington, D.C. area, focused on the intersection of transportation, economic development, and energy transformation, building on his career spent in both the public and private sector in and around utility and energy industries. With that, please welcome me in introducing this.
Thanks.
And before Mr. Kilmer starts, I was remiss in not noting Mayor Giles serves on a national electric vehicle or electrification task force, so also brings that expertise to us as well. So with that, Mr. Kilmer.
Thank you. Thanks, Audra. Thank you for having me today. As it was teed up, I came really to give an informational overview on SRP's activities related to preparing the grid for the EVs that are already here and arriving quickly on the grid. I'm going to try to keep this high level and really leave it open to questions and answers at the end. On the off chance I morph into any jargon, which I try to avoid, feel free to stop and ask me questions as I go. So if we rewind briefly, EVs on the grid are not new. The importance of them to SRP are not new. Really, our journey began way back in 2017 when SRP embarked on setting sustainability goals for the company. In 2017, an initial set of sustainability goals was established. After a stakeholder process in 2018, a number of revised goals were adopted in 2019. And this really, for SRP, put the importance on being ready for electric vehicles in our territory kind of on the radar in a much bigger way. It kind of rose to the top of the house, and it kicked off a lot of activity across the company to make sure we're ready. Not going to go over all of this. The point here is our 2035 sustainability goals fit into a framework that really have 5 pillars. And the one I'll point you to is goal number 4.3, which I'll say more about in a couple moments. But transportation electrification, is a core part of our overall company 2035 sustainability goal framework. So, it reflects the importance of EVs on the system, the importance of SRP's role in enabling this on the grid, supporting our customers and supporting our communities. So that's just a little bit of background how we got where we are. Fast forward a little bit, maybe before I kind of dive into specific things SRP's done, just want to talk a little bit about the kind of what's going on, nationally, just trends around EVs. This is really an update, some highlights that we get a lot of insight and information from EPRI. EPRI is the Electric Power Research Institute. We work very closely with them, and they have an entire practice around transportation electrification. But where we are today, there's well over 90 EV models on the market. There's over 3.5 million EVs on the road in the US. There's trillions of dollars being invested by OEMs, battery makers, you name it. It's all in the news. And what does this mean? At the end of the day, every new EV put on the road represents about 3,500 kilowatt hours per year of new electric use. And that's something that utilities, including SRP, need to be keenly focused on. So just kind of a broad market snapshot. I'll warn you, the next slide's a little bit of an eye chart. Don't squint. The details don't matter. What this is, it really is a heat map. It's kind of showing, where is EV adoption occurring? And this was through June of 2023. I think the takeaway from this is EV adoption across the country is not occurring uniformly. There are regions of the country where it's very, very robust, and there's regions of the country where it is almost not happening at all. Sometimes you'll hear headlines that reflect what's happening in other parts of the country, but the trend is this chart continues to get more colorful over time. But everything's a little bit different, as we go from the coast to the middle of the country. I do think bringing this closer to home, the important thing is Arizona is doing remarkably well, I guess, depending on what your definition of well is. But EV adoption is quite robust. Depending on the measure, we're about 10th, give or take, in EV sales. Which I think is quite stunning, given we don't have the policy kind of framework that they do in California, Oregon, Washington, some of the Northeast states, but the market has just developed, and adoption is quite robust in Arizona, as you can tell from the colorful chart. So bringing this a little bit even closer to home, within SRP's territory, we see just over 45,000 EVs on the road that customers in our territory have today. The Arizona statewide numbers somewhere around 100,000, give or take, today, and you can kind of see the trend line. It's growing quite quickly. So it's kind of where we are. So let's dive in a little bit more into, okay, what does enabling EVs mean to a utility like SRP? The 2035 goals that we put within our sustainability goal framework calls for the enablement of 500,000 EVs by 2035. And another concept I'll come back to at the end of this, we'd like to see 90% of the EV load under some form of managed charging. The importance of that is really just, EVs really to a utility reflect a new load, but it's also somewhat flexible. So how do we tap into that flexibility and perhaps influence when customers charge? And there's different ways to do that. But what the picture kind of represents, there's a number of activities, we have underway that I call enabling activities. And it's really how do we enable the grid? How do we empower our customers? How do we support our communities as communities seek to electrify? We have activities underway across all of those pillars. When we look to the future, there's a number of other more strategic opportunities that EVs on the road represent. that we're really more in study mode. Like what is this going to mean to the grid? What role should SRP play? How do we tap into it? And those are things like I mentioned managed charging. We don't have the full game plan figured out just yet for how we're going to optimize the flexibility of the EV load. You will hear terms coming out of some of the automakers. They talk about vehicle to grid. The concept there being a lot of automakers are moving towards making vehicles that can also send energy back to the grid in a bi-directional way. They can charge, they can send energy back. It's been proven technically it can work. Is it going to work at scale? What does that mean for utility? Can it be a resource that we tap into? There's a bit of the art of the possible, but what will really be commercially viable and what will make sense, don't know. So the question, of the future will be, how do we tap into EVs as a true grid resource? So these are more strategic things we're looking at. We're trying to, figure out what might occur, what might be brought to market, what are both the technical and commercial possibilities there. So this is kind of just a simplistic picture of the kind of things we are doing. I know there's a lot of interest in how are we making sure the grid's going to be ready. So I want to just dive into that a little bit. EVs and those 500,000 EVs on the road do reflect new load. We incorporate that into our load forecast, which feeds into our integrated system plan. And I don't want to go very deep into the integrated system plan because that's a topic unto its own. But that's really how is SRP going to meet, as in a clean, reliable, affordable, sustainable way, the load of the future. And we look at economic growth and all the other factors on here. But the new EV load is an important component of that. We forecast it. We look at different scenarios. What if EV adoption is more robust than we expect? What if it's less? And all of that is factored into our integrated system planning. And as I mentioned, the different scenarios we look at are everything from 500,000 to nearly 1 million potential EVs in our territory. Won't go through all the details behind that, but we look at that within the framework of how are we going to meet our load. And it's interesting because at the end of the day, to SRP, the EV load's important. We need to factor it in here. It's actually a fairly small portion of the load growth in the valley. Just the basic economic growth that we see is a much, much bigger component. EV load can get a lot of headlines on, are you going to be able to support it? It's a valid question. It's one we work hard to answer. It's also a fairly small portion of the impact that we see. I want to go down a level because it's an important concept. Preparing the grid to support EVs is not just do we have enough generating resources on the system to meet that load. It's also, is the distribution grid going to be ready? And within our integrated system planning process, we also look closely at the actual transmission and distribution system. And we don't just look at electric vehicles. We look at where are customers installing solar, where can we get more energy efficiency and demand response and things like that. On the distribution side, we're working very hard to look at where do we expect this load to occur and when. Where might it require transformer upgrades, feeder upgrades, substation upgrades, and things like that. An area we're starting to look at a lot more closely than I think we had in the past is as commercial fleets or municipalities and things like that electrify, the needs have become very different. The density of charging of like a major fleet depot is very, very intense. I've heard others refer to it as almost, we can support the load across the system, but putting a major trucking fleet depot in is like building a skyscraper in terms of the amount of load. Like where they put it matters, location, location, location. So we're working closely with EPRI and some other data sources to understand where might the medium and heavy duty trucking load occur. Where do we need to prepare to support that kind of charging on the system? because that can have much more acute transmission and distribution impacts. So our distribution planning team's working very hard looking at that. And lastly, kind of within that integrated system planning framework, this kind of circles back to what I mentioned, tapping into the flexibility of load. We have a study underway right now to really create that managed charging sort of strategy and roadmap. How much load can we shift around from peak periods to daytime or nighttime using either price plans or other technology solutions is an effort that's underway as we speak. We're trying to mitigate, any detrimental impacts to the grid, make it as beneficial as we can. There's a lot to sort out, within that. So this is a journey. We don't have all the answers today. We know what's coming. We see what's coming, and we're working hard to prepare for it. I like to highlight, I may be speaking on behalf of SRP on this. It's very much a team sport. We have people from distribution, customer programs, our integrated system planning team, load forecasting, all, working on this effort. So with that, I'll kind of stop there and open it up to any questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll kick off questions with Mayor Weiss, and then I think Mayor Gallego right after that.
This was incredibly helpful. I think when we had this discussion many months ago, almost a year ago, I think that the concerns that the cities had, the concern that I had was a roadmap of how cities would work with exactly what you're talking about, not only private charging stations or public charging stations, but private ones, especially in the West Valley where you have huge logistics and distribution centers in Goodyear, Buckeye, Glendale. Helping us understand what that zoning process looks like. Obviously, we'll learn more in the future. But I'm wondering how, one of the things that we talked about at the time was the role of cities in this infrastructure. When you have a lot of private companies that will put in charging stations as a way to attract businesses or attract customers, keep customers there longer. I'll use the example of Walmart that is installing charging stations in all of their Sam's Clubs and Walmarts across the United States. They estimate that will reach 90% of the population. I'm wondering what that looks like. And I don't think you're going to have an answer for us today, but I'm wondering what that looks like for cities as we go through that process. And as you talk about, what does that distribution load look like, not only for the public, but Gilbert, I think, just bought their first electric fire truck.
Yes.
What does that look like for municipalities? And I think I'd like to have, for me, not really a question, but I'd like to have more further information in the future on that as you get more information and as we kind of go over these speed bumps a little bit in our own cities. But this was really helpful. It's helpful to know that the private part of this, people installing kilowatt chargers in their homes or other places, isn't a huge drain. It's that distribution and concentrating it where it's at that seems to be the problem. So I appreciate being here.
Yeah, well, thank you. And a couple of points you raised there. The I-10 corridor, as we've gotten data on trucking routes and where trucking load might occur, the I-10 corridor is kind of keenly on our radar. You also raised another interesting point. Because EV adoption is pretty robust here in Arizona, we indeed have attracted almost all of the commercial public charging entities. You mentioned Walmart. Yes, they're knocking on our door looking to develop. What's that going to look like in 10 years? How ubiquitous will those types of public charging options be? What impact does that have on the need to serve like multi-unit dwellings, apartment buildings, and condos, some of which are putting in charging, but how do you take care of the people that don't have a private home residence they can put a charger in their garage? It's going to be, there's a lot of new solutions coming out, and who's going to use those Walmart chargers effectively? Not sure. In the meantime, I think more options that are out there and see how it emerges will be fascinating. And as you said, I don't have the answer for what the world's going to look like in 2035 from a charging standpoint. So,
but I think continuous updates, not every month, obviously,
Yeah.
Ed, but I think once or twice a year, once a year that says, this is where we're at in this process. This is what we've learned. This is what surprised us.
Yeah.
And then stories from other cities of what they're going through would be helpful.
Thank you, Mayor Weiss. Mayor Geigo.
So we meet on the 2-year anniversary of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. Can you talk about how that has impacted EV deployment in it?
Yeah, it's not something SRP has directly tapped into. We've certainly seen, we follow the NEVI process, for instance, which is ADOT working to get the highway corridors covered. Interestingly, SRP's territory is so condensed in the metro area that it doesn't really overlap with our footprint. So we don't have the developers tapping into, say, the federal highway funding, because that's covering more of the far reaches of the state. Where we have seen it, we've supported a number of community CFI, community funding, or I forget what it stood for, but basically community charging infrastructure that the DOE was awarding. A number of the municipalities pursued that. We worked with them to support their applications, really to just get more public charging out there in the towns and communities. So haven't seen a lot of that awarded yet, but certainly a lot of activity.
Wonderful. Can I?
Yeah.
We have CAE is doing aircraft and pilot training in Mesa, Arizona with electric airplanes. I think United Aviate Academy is going to do pilot training in Goodyear, Arizona. Are you, and at least CAE, I think, is in SRP service territory. Are you thinking about electric aviation at all?
I haven't heard of that one, so I'd have to go back and dig. In a prior life, I saw a lot going on with hydrogen fuel cell aviation. That's another direction that aviation seems to want to go. So not sure. I don't have the answer to that.
Perfect. And last question, hopefully a little easier. You had pilots around vehicle to grid. So we have Foxlink in Phoenix that is building vehicle to grid technology. It's all going to California right now. Anything coming soon for Arizona?
It's an interesting topic. In a way, right now we're trying to learn from what's been done elsewhere in the country. There have been a number of pilots. We don't need every utility piloting every vehicle technology out there. The one that we haven't started anything on yet, but I'm interested to see us kick up. That I think electrification of school buses is going to ramp up. I think Tempe got the first one that I know of in the Valley, but I think there's more coming. There's a number of interesting potential use cases for using school buses in a vehicle to grid way that we'd like to look at and explore. So nothing firmly planned yet, but something we'd like to study to see what we could do.
Wonderful. And I think Cartwright and Phoenix Union in Phoenix have electric school buses as well. So maybe a growing trend. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Geigo. Supervisor Sellers.
Yeah, actually what I'm going to talk to you about, I think probably falls outside of your area, but I met with a friend of mine who is the sustainability manager at U-Haul. And they're very concerned about the electric trucks that they're putting into their fleet. And his immediate concern is people that rent the trucks to go from here to Tucson, and that they don't have charging stations to support that. And again, like I say, that's probably out of your area, but I thought you might know something about it.
I don't with U-Haul directly. I know U-Haul as a company has been beginning to introduce some electric rentals. Interestingly, I know I saw a Penske rental van of some sort that had EV plastered on the side of it. I think it's an interesting challenge. Does U-Haul want to step in and try to provide for that, or are they going to look to the commercial market to have charging options? And then how do they educate their customers? And a parallel I'll draw is a number of rental car companies, a lot of them at Sky Harbor Airport, have put a lot of just passenger EVs in their rental fleet. Quite a number of them did that really quick without a lot of customer education, without a lot of how do you go charge these things. It was not a great customer experience. And I think a lot was learned from that, that hopefully U-Haul can learn from what it Hertz and Enterprise and some others do. how are they steering, their rental customers to charge? Different use case perhaps, but a very similar kind of thing where you've got, new drivers that need to get from A to B and need to know how and where to charge. So,
Well, but certainly with our need for air quality credits, I want to encourage any of this kind of activity I can. So any way I can help them, I'm going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Sellers. Mayor Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. Mayor Weiss mentioned the new electric fire engine in the town of Gilbert that we happened to just do a push-in event just a couple of weeks ago. I just wanted to thank SRP for partnering with us on that and making sure the infrastructure was in place for our Station 2, where that fire station will be housed at Higley and Guadalupe, which rolls into Mesa quite often, but I know Mesa is right behind us on their first electric fire engine because I had a conversation with one of your council members on Saturday challenging me because it does have diesel in it, but it needs to have some sort of backup in the electric fire engine. So thank you for that. Thank you for being part of that big unveiling in the town of Gilbert a couple weeks ago too.
sure. It was great to see.
Thank you. Hang on just one second, Mayor Giles. Councilmember Stitt.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of obviously excitement and energy around it. Everyone is doing something a little bit different. We have just zoned a parcel for a commercial truck charging station, charging facility that is privately owned in our city off of I-10. But I think this begs the larger question. We're going to hear from SRP, we're going to hear from APS, and that's great individually. But I think collectively getting our public utilities together, working on kind of a unified strategy, at least to me, seems to make the most amount of sense. Because despite our best efforts at the local government level, we cannot do a single thing if the power is not available. And I think we've got to know with a greater level of confidence that our utilities are going to be able to provide. We hear over and over stories throughout the country that a municipality wants to move forward, but they're unable to because the utility can't hold up their end of the deal. So is there anything going forward that is going to push Tucson Electric and SRP and APS and any of the other providers together?
Short answer is yes. We collaborate closely with TEP and APS, where we can. Obviously, we're governed differently and all that. An example that I think you used to kind of tee up the question, which is a very interesting one, is how do we, any of the utilities, really plan and prepare for, and I'll go back to the truck depots because that may be what you were pointing at. A lot of the truckers don't have experience with electrification. It's new. They're just trying to figure out where can they get vehicles. Then they might turn their attention to how much charging do I need and where do I want to put it. And some of them are learning that that's not as easy as just call the utility and I can have service, next month. So there absolutely have been case studies in other states where trucking electrification's happening more quickly, where they don't think to engage the utility with what do they need. But then the other thing that's occurring at the same time is, while, okay, take a big trucker, I'll just pick one, JB Hunt, big national trucker, I know they're in town. Do they use their existing location as a charging depot? Or there are new venture capital backed commercial entities bursting on the scene to buy land to develop like semi-private, like subscription based charging locations. Well, from a utility planning standpoint, is all that load going to charge at the existing, trucking depot location, or 5 miles down the road where there's companies like Terawatt, that's one company, another one, there's a few others like that have started in California, but they're looking at highway corridors to support trucking. They're buying parcels. We've tried to engage with those entities. What are your plans in Arizona? Where do you want to build? Who's going to use it? when I mentioned earlier, location, it's one thing to know we can serve the load, but there's a big difference between is it here or is it here, for us to do the distribution, in more local planning. So it's not just something the utilities can do in a vacuum. We need a little heads up for what are the plans from Hertz, Penske, JB Hunt, all the local distributors. We're talking to Amazon, et cetera. And that's something that we can do collectively with APS, for instance. We've talked to them about what are you seeing, who's locating where, what kind of what impacts does that have to your current customer base. So it's a complex, environment and set of players emerging to build for.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Right, Mayor Giles.
Thank you. I appreciate Ed making folks aware that I do have an assignment to serve on it's called the Electric Vehicle Working Group appointed by the Secretaries of Transportation and Energy. I volunteered to do this at the encouragement of the region because just to state the obvious, electric vehicle is a big part of our obviously we are adopting it at a rate faster than the rest of the country, and it's a significant part of our economy as well. So I think I was pleased to get the appointment because I think it's important that we have an Arizona voice on these issues. But the point of this committee is to issue a report within the next 2 years that addresses what the opportunities and obstacles are nationwide for electric vehicle adoption. So I am anxious to hear from the folks in this room what you see as what are the questions that need to be answered that you I think in local government we have to have our eyes open and see this is happening. We're not having a policy debate. Are we pro or con EVs? It's happening. So we need to adopt it. And as has been indicated, we operate fleets ourselves of buses and fire trucks and police cars. And so that just for our own selfish reasons, we need to figure this out. But there's also, like I said, the other option or obstacles and opportunities. So I would right now I'm all ears. But please let me know what your concerns are, and I'll try to use the national resources to come back and address some of that. For example, public safety. I've talked with a lot of police or fire chiefs that say that they, on a daily basis, in my community and in yours, they have vehicle fires. And that's typically something that is resolved in a matter of minutes, unless it's an electric vehicle. And then it can be something that lasts days. And modeled zoning ordinances. When was the last time that you approved a multifamily housing complex in your city for 200 or 300 units? And did you count how many EV parking places there were there? If we know that with the price point coming down on these vehicles, in the very near future, a lot of the folks that live in those buildings are going to be looking for where do I plug in my vehicle at the end of the day? So there's some very practical challenges that local elected officials are going to need to be very well versed on as we in the very near future. So please let me know if as you stumble across these challenges and opportunities, and I would love to hopefully help find some answers.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Washburn, I think it might be helpful as we go forward is, and Ed, I don't know if MAG would want to facilitate this or not, but it might make sense to have just a session with cities, invite them to come and have their questions ready, engage Mayor Giles' organization and MAG. And instead of doing this way, just have a meeting and invite the cities and put together an agenda and say, this is what we're going to do. I think you bring up a point too, because I think for the city of Avondale, we mandate a certain amount of EV charging stations per 100 multifamily units. Is that enough? What does the future look like going forward? I think it would help cities to organize to help this. So it would be economic development. It would be planning and zoning. It would be engineering. It would be transportation. It would be city council members. It would be all those people who are involved, sustainability directors, SRP, APS, TEP. But John, I think that makes sense to kind of get everyone together and have that discussion. And I don't know, Ed, if that's MAG's purview, if that's something that you guys be willing to do.
that is something we can absolutely pull together. We can work with Mayor Giles and see what's the most useful way to get information that you can make usable back to your national committee, and we can organize that in the new year. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. Anybody
Uh,
on comments or questions?
Yes, this is Kathy Littlefield from the city of Scottsdale. And I would just like to say, I like the idea of getting the cities involved with this. I know Scottsdale is just got a sustainability director, and we had a report just in our last meeting about what we're doing and how we're trying to get there. I think more information and knowledge regarding this kind of sustainability would be extremely helpful to all cities. And I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online? All right. Great job. Great presentation. Thanks for being here. We will, and this was for information and discussion only. On to item number 7, expansion of the Diamond Grind pilot program. Item number 7 is on the agenda for recommended approval. Ed, would you please introduce this item? No, John, would you please introduce? Somebody introduce us.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair, members of the TBC. This is a follow-up from your presentation last month. I think we had a lot of really good discussion, talked through a lot of issues. And so Armenta Saeed from MagSaff is here to provide a follow-up. And this represents actual action to move forward. And that action is coupled with some ongoing reporting and updates to this committee. So I'll turn it over to Armenta.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, members of Transportation Policy Committee. I am here again, like I was last month, to provide a follow-up presentation, and thank you again for indulging me and giving me some of your time. Hopefully it won't take as long as I did at the last presentation. We also do have Dr. Charles Garganis, who was the project manager for the peer review analysis we completed. He joined us for the presentation in person last month. He has joined us today virtually to take any technical questions you may have at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. So as John had mentioned, this is a follow-up to last month where we discussed coming back with an action to expand the Diamond Grind pilot program. But before we get into exactly what that expansion includes, we'll start with a brief review of the key points that were presented last month, knowing that several of you were unable to make it to that meeting. Next slide, please. And so to get into the review, if you'll remember, the peer review analysis, the main thing that we found was that there is no other peer region that replicates the pavement specifications that we've historically done in the MAG region. So meaning that nobody overlays brand new concrete pavement. If they do that, it happens at the end of that concrete pavement surface life as a maintenance practice to prolong that surface life. Next slide, please. And then from a ride quality perspective, we did find that from a roughness or a smooth ride that it provides, Diamond Grind does outperform rubberized asphalt. They both initially provide a very smooth ride, but with Diamond Grind that remains consistent over its service life. With rubberized asphalt, that smooth ride starts to deteriorate over time. Next slide. And then remaining on ride quality, but focusing more on the safety factor or the friction level. Similar kind of story where both pavement surfaces provide initially a really high level of friction. And then with rubberized asphalt, again, that starts to diminish over time. With Diamond Grind, it remains consistent. And then it's even a little bit further exacerbated for rubberized asphalt as the required maintenance actions further or more quickly deteriorate the friction benefits provided by rubberized asphalt. Next slide. And then those maintenance practices that are required. With rubberized asphalt, the issues that pop up, they need to be addressed immediately because they cause operational and safety concerns. And then with Diamond Grind, the maintenance practice can occur on a scheduled basis. It doesn't need to occur immediately. And in fact, currently, it's scheduled to occur every other year, so it can occur much less frequently. Next slide. And then to Chair Osborne's point from the last meeting, the maintenance implication that then results in the level of the roadway user disruption. I've taken into its own slide just to emphasize what a significant factor this is. And so because of all the required maintenance that rubberized asphalt requires, and then the lane closures that need to occur to get that maintenance done, it's much more disruptive to the roadway user. With Diamond Grind, it still requires the lane closure, but again, because that's something that's scheduled and it can occur much less frequently, it's much less of a disruption to the user. Next slide. And then from a traffic noise perspective, we do know that rubberized asphalt initially provides the quietest levels of traffic noise. Diamond Grind does also initially provide a supplemental reduction in traffic noise. That supplemental reduction for Diamond Grind remains consistent over its service life. So very similar story to our other factors. With rubberized asphalt, that noise suppression benefit diminishes over time, and the maintenance actions further deteriorate the noise suppression benefits. Next slide. And then from a cost perspective, we did find that from now until 2050, on average, rubberized asphalt will cost about $1 billion more than Diamond Grind would. And then we did find that in every single scenario, no matter what kind of input you include as part of the life cycle cost analysis, Diamond Grind always results in a cheaper alternative in terms of life cycle cost than rubberized asphalt does. This is mostly due to its longer service life. It's due to less expensive capital replacement needs, as you don't need to mill off that layer of rubberized asphalt before you implement the Diamond Grind. Next slide. And then from a public feedback perspective, we know that, of course, rubberized asphalt was initially incredibly well received by all the county residents. And then as it's began to deteriorate, that feedback has changed from positive to negative. An example would be on State Route 51, where that rubberized asphalt is falling apart, and we've been receiving a lot of negative public feedback on that. With Diamond Grind, it's the opposite story, where as it was initially implemented on the Price Corridor, we received a lot of concerns about traffic noise. As Diamond Grind has been implemented in other areas of the region, that feedback has been more positive, or at the very least neutral. Next slide. And so these are all the things that I just talked about on one summary table, just to show that Diamond Grind really does outperform rubberized asphalt in nearly all the categories we've looked at. And so as a result, the staff recommendation was to expand the Diamond Grind pilot program. Next slide. And so I'll go over exactly now what that expansion includes, taking into account some of the discussion and feedback received from you all last month. Go to the next slide. We're actually, we've developed this proposed expansion to include 4 different major pieces. They're listed here on the screen in front of you, and I'll start to go over each of these in more detail. Next slide. So the first part of the proposed expansion would include implementing Diamond Grind on freeway lifecycle program projects where feasible. And so if approved, this would mean that those freeway projects, the scopes of those freeway projects would be modified to include Diamond Grind instead of rubberized asphalt. And then that Diamond Grind would be implemented as these projects are programmed for construction. So it would come online sequentially. And then finally, Diamond Grind would be the technique used for any maintenance requirements in the MET region. Next slide. And then the second part of the expansion is something, because we consider this to still very much be a pilot, to continue all the ongoing study efforts and to continue assessing performance factors. So the 3 current major active efforts underway are listed here on the screen in front of you. First of all, we're working with ADOT to complete an urban heat island study. ADOT today is actually just in contract negotiations, and we are aiming for that kickoff to be in December and hoping to come back with the concluding results in 12 months' time. And then secondly, we will be kicking off the second phase of the independent noise analysis study that MAG conducted in 2021. This will focus on the third original pilot project that has yet to be completed on Loop 101 Agua Fria from 75th Avenue to I-17. And then this will also include compiling different data points where feasible and under different temporal conditions. For example, let's say along the price corridor during the winter timeframe. And then that last piece is a new piece that we are proposing. We are proposing to develop a program in coordination with ADOT to assess the long-term ride quality performance of Diamond Grind. And so this will include compiling on an ongoing basis different factors like friction, roughness, smoothness, texture, and then of course any maintenance actions that are required. Next slide. And then as we're continuing to do these ongoing assessments, we also want to ensure that there's a process set up to come back and provide this committee with updates. And so that's the third major piece of this proposed expansion. There's a timeline, an example of a timeline on the slide in front of you of what that first year would look like. We are aiming to come back and provide quarterly updates. And because these different programs are these different study efforts are in different stages, the updates would be inclusive of any work that has been conducted in that prior quarter. So for example, that first quarterly update in March of 24, by then there will be progress made on the urban heat island study, on the freeway noise study, and we'll be able to come back and provide some updates. But the ride quality assessment program, because that's still very much being developed now, we can come back and provide some details on what that will include, but you may not get a real, or you may not get an updated assessment of the ride quality till that second update in June. Next slide. And then the fourth and final piece can kind of be broken up into two parts, and it really originated from the discussion on Loop 101 Price Freeway. Because of the contrasting public feedback we got with Price in comparison to the different completed Diamond Grind efforts, it's something that we really consider to be an anomaly. And so wanting to ensure that as Diamond Grind is expanded and implemented in more areas of the region, it's done in a consistent manner, we will be working with ADOT to develop specifications. This can even include best practices to address different circumstances that are present on the freeway network. And this will be something that continues on an ongoing basis. As we complete more projects, we learn more. We plan to update those standards with lessons learned and best practices. And then finally, this will include addressing any inconsistencies that are existing today on Diamond Grind projects that have been completed. Next slide. And so that brings us to the second part, addressing that inconsistency on Loop 101 Price. Loop 101 Price from baseline to Loop 202 Santan was the first pilot to be completed. And it was the only section to date, again, to said this many times, it's the only section to date where we've received that level of negative public feedback regarding traffic noise. And so following last month's discussion, we initiated conversations with ADOT to look at really what is making that corridor different, or what can we point to that is visibly, noticeably different from the other completed Diamond Grind sections. We did find that there is evidence of transverse tines, or the horizontal lines that we had discussed the prior month, and we know that that causes an impact of tire whining, resulting in those pitchy tonal noises that humans typically find annoying. And so since that's the only visible difference that we can point to, that's our leading theory, and that's what we plan to address. We're going to address this by, number one, working with ADOT to develop specifications on how to address any future circumstances of transverse tining that we may come across. And then also going back on the Loop 101 Price corridor to regrind that corridor to ensure that any evidence of transverse tines has been fully removed. Next slide. And so that concludes my presentation today. Just a reminder that this is again on the agenda today for action. The action requested is quite a mouthful, but it is to recommend approval to expand the Diamond Grind pilot program to all feasible freeway life cycle program projects, while continuing to assess its long-term performance and ensure consistency in the implementation of Diamond Grind, including regrinding that Loop 101 price corridor. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of TPC. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Arminta. First off, just a fantastic presentation and great job going back and as questions are answered, each time we've had a discussion about this, you're grabbing more data and bringing it to the table. So really, really appreciate that. Let's see, members, we'll start with Supervisor Sellers.
Yeah, quick question. Do we know timing on the regrind of price?
Mr. Chair, members of TPC, Supervisor Sellers, should this action be approved today, we will immediately initiate discussions with ADOT to scope what that regrind will look like. And then we will initiate the regrind. We hope to have it done in early 2024.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stitt.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation. The word that stuck out to me was friction. And I think it's very apparent on the section of I-10 east of Avondale Boulevard, 107th. I think it's from that section past the new interchange. It is very, I'm going to say the tires adhere very tightly to the roadway to the point that cars will actually wobble when they drive. And I was, as that was happening early on following that, I was thinking this will be a very interesting study when it rains. I don't think we've had any rain since we probably did the Diamond Grind, at least in the West Valley. So I would ask that we take a look at cause and effect on that section of I-10 as we are examining Diamond Grind as a strategy, because I think the way that the vehicles are adhering to the roadway, if it feels hazardous driving in dry conditions, and if you are keeping that level of friction when it's wet, I think we're going to have some chaos out there on that particular section. The other thing that I was kind of sharing is we're eliminating the rubberized asphalt, which was a great sound barrier, in using this as our way forward. The challenge, I think, in some of that is if we're diamond grinding in areas that are not residential, the theory of if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there, does it still make a sound? I think that still holds true with diamond grind. So I think paying attention to where we're doing this in correlation to residential areas is also very informative before this becomes a system-wide process. I'm kind of concerned about that section that I just referred to on I-10 is in the middle of really a commercial area. Theoretically, there's no one there to hear it. But if you do that same thing along the 303 through Goodyear, I guarantee you there are people that are going to hear that. So we're having discussions about sound walls on the 303, even though it's a depressed, graded area. So I hope we're taking all of those things into consideration as we move forward with continuing to pilot whether this becomes a permanent solution or not. But I do appreciate the slow strategic process that we're taking to go forward with it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Stitt. Mayor Weiss.
I just want to echo, I think one of the most thorough presentations I've seen in a long time. And even though I haven't been in the meeting, I've been dialing in. I think Bill touched on a lot of it. there's a couple things here. The original discussions on the issues with the 101 and Price Freeway, from what I remember, were you talked about the tone, the whining, the residents, but it was two of the questions that came up were speed. Did that sound change with speed, time of day? And did it change based on the weight of the vehicle? So how much truck traffic is on there, and does that impact that? My assumption is that we will figure out once we regrind if it solves the problem before we go into other areas. Bill and I were just looking at a map of the 101 in the area that you're talking about. It is densely populated from 75th Avenue to I-17 on both sides of the freeway. And I just want to make sure that we have everything, because I remember how intense that conversation was with Mayor Woods. I want to make sure that we have everything under control before we go further with that. I will tell you that I hadn't really thought about when you talked about friction, traction. I drive that area sometimes two or three times a day. And when you said that, it does drive differently. Now, does it drive differently because of the way I drive? I don't. No, I think I drive pretty well. I do. But again, I think it's just interesting to see what the effects there are. And if we're looking at 2024, early 2024 to regrind that area of the 101, how long is that test phase to look at and see if the issues go away? We're looking at 6 months, or are we looking at a year? Yeah, tell us.
Members of TPC, Mayor Weiss, great points. Those are all part of developing what the scope is, looking at that regrind. But to your point, approaching that regrind of Loop 101 Price as a learning project where we can learn what did this work. This is still very much a leading theory. It's the only thing that we can point to right now. So we're pretty confident in addressing it, but still a theory.
Right.
And so we hope that when we come back with that quarterly update in March of 24, we'll be well along developing and working on the regrinding, but coming back to give you more details on what studying that impact of the regrind will be.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Real quick too, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Weiss, you know, I think too, as you look at this and you look at this as an ongoing study effort, a lot of these items won't be sorted out immediately. And so really what we need is a long-term data collection effort. You look back at the rubberized asphalt program here in the Valley, that took 10 years for ADOT to study really what the full impact of rubberized asphalt, and some of these problems you don't really realize the magnitude of the scope of the problem until it's been on the road for 3, 4, 5 years. And so, part of the intention with this ongoing effort is that we can continue to get this feedback. We can continue to provide you all this feedback over a longer duration, but some of it just relates to time and having it in there and being able to see some of the weather inversion, how that impacts some of the complaints, some of the changes in noise, et cetera, et cetera.
No, Mr. Chairman, John, I think that you're going to find agreement with that from the committee. I think we'd rather take a cautious approach on this and get it right than rush it just for the sake of getting it done. So whatever you guys need to do, I have faith in what you're trying to do. I just, it'd be interesting to kind of see. You bring up the rain points, and I think that'd be interesting to find out.
Any comments on Mayor Weiss's driving ability?
Hey, so I just
from
say,
John or
hold
Ed
on,
or
hold on.
Menta?
My wife and I have this discussion. I've been driving for 42 years. I'm an excellent driver, 42 years, and I've never had an accident. Never had a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
Never had a speeding ticket.
Mayor Giles.
Never had a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
Are you saying the car might
I've
come
only
and
had
bite
one
me?
in
Is
the
that what
city
you're
of
saying?
Mesa.
There we go, right there. Ed.
Mayor Giles,
Okay, well,
help
That's
us.
hard to follow, Mayor Giles.
yeah.
Help us get back on track.
The Fifth Amendment, I think, gives me the right to not discuss my particular driving history. So, in addition to the pilot program that we just heard about, Mesa also received an allocation to work on the US 60. And so I was asked by MAC staff to maybe just share briefly what our experience was. You may recall there were a few years ago, the US 60 was in very bad shape because of the deterioration of the rubberized asphalt. It was a rough ride. And so there was some milling that was done there, but then it went from bad to worse because there wasn't a great job of picking up the what remained after the milling. And so I was invited, and so there was a special allocation from the legislature to do diamond grind beginning in Apache Junction all the way through Mesa and portion of Gilbert into Tempe now. And I was invited a while back by, well, over a year ago by the contractors to come out and see that process, ride with them, look at the equipment, get a better introduction, because they had been inundated by claims for broken windshields because of they admitted we did a bad job and we're paying a heavy price for it. We've learned our lesson, and we want to just let local government know what we're doing to be better at this. And since that time, I have to tell you, it's gone very well. And so I would not, our experience would not be contrary to anything that you just heard here today. My personal experience in driving this US 60 is that I'm a fan. The quality of the ride, the quality of the noise. Again, you can't beat brand new rubberized asphalt, but I am not a fan of rubberized asphalt anymore, given the pothole. The potholes are just, after a year or two, you hate rubberized asphalt. So our experience has been, we've learned from this milling, experience. When you do replace the rubberized asphalt, you have to be very careful. The contractor is going to pay a lot of claims if he doesn't. But once you get that hurdle, it's been a good experience in Mesa.
So when the speed started hitting triple digits, did it smooth out?
Again, the Fifth Amendment, I think, applies in this situation. Not going to respond.
All right. Anybody online with comments or questions?
This is Kathy Littlefield from Scottsdale. Yeah, I agree with Mayor Weiss. I think he's right on board. We need to make sure we do this with a reasonable time frame that actually reflects the reality before we change the whole thing. I know most people who've had the rubberized asphalt love it because it does reduce the sound and the vibrations and things. So I'd like to make sure that the other does as well in that area, especially when you're near the freeways. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Littlefield. Okay, anybody else online? All right, prior to the vote, there's an opportunity for members of the public to comment. I do not have any speaker request cards for this item. And looking over, I'm seeing a no from staff. We have not received any online written comments for this agenda either. Okay. Is there a motion to approve agenda item number 7?
I'll make the motion, sir.
Motion for approval from Mayor Weiss, second from Mayor Stipp with a handshake.
Mayor Stipp.
I'm sorry, council member. Mayor, don't tell Pizzillo. All right, let's get on to voting here. We'll have those participating in the meeting online take part in this vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. Members, please leave your cameras on. Staff, can you take a roll call vote of the members participating virtually who do not turn on their camera?
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Roy Miller. Councilmember Littlefield.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair, the motion passes.
All right. Outstanding. Thank you very much. That's a fantastic discussion too. I really appreciate the questions and the dialogue. Item number 8, the 2023 annual report on the status of the implementation of Proposition 400. And item number 8 is on the agenda for information and discussion. Ed, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll turn it over to John Bolin, but this is required by state law, so we are following state law, which I'm always in favor of doing. And with that, I'll turn over to Mr. Bolin to introduce the item.
Just an added emphasis. State law does require that we produce a annual report on Proposition 400. Steph will give you details about which report this represents in the sequence. But I do want to pause and say this report is very comprehensive in nature, and I think it does a terrific job reflecting all the work that has been done here in this region with Proposition 400 and really all the projects that we've been able to deliver. So with that, I will turn it over to Steph to talk about this year's report.
All right. Thank you and good afternoon, Chair Osborne, members of the committee. Pleased to be here to present this just for information and discussion. I'll start with a quick overview of what the report is, what it addresses. So like Ed and John have said, this has been prepared according to state statute. The report addresses the project status, financing, and outlook for implementation for each of the 3 modal lifecycle programs. That's the freeway, the arterial, and the transit lifecycle program. The report does also look into projections. We consider both half-cent sales tax and federal fund projections. So shown here on the screen are the half-cent sales tax, which over the lifetime or over the remaining lifetime of the program are projected to come in at $2 billion. You can see with the bar chart on the screen that the 2023 report revenue projections were slightly higher than 2022, which is good news. Moving on to our federal funds, which are projected to come in just over $687 million over the life or over the remaining life of the program. And then I'll call your attention to the bar chart or the pie chart on the screen. You notice a significant amount of the pie chart is FTA funds. And this is because the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA, provided historic increases to FTA funding nationwide. So that's why we're seeing that. Moving on to each of the 3 modal lifecycle programs, beginning with the FLCP. 3 projects were completed, including I-10 Papago, SR-85 to Verrado Way. I'm sure Chair Osborne is intimately familiar with this one. We also had SR-24, Ellsworth to Ironwood, and then the 202 Lindsay Road interchange. A number of projects were underway on the screen. I'll just highlight a few. I-17 up to the Yavapai County line, the 43rd and 51st Avenue interchanges near the TSMC development, and then the Broadway curve. I'll also add another caveat that these project statuses are as of June 30th, 2023, so very much representative of fiscal year 2023. Moving on to the arterial lifecycle program. Many projects were completed, underway, or advertised for bid during this past year. Just a small selection are shown on the screen. 2 of the projects that were completed, Northern Parkway and then Southern Avenue and Stapley, are shown on the screen. So this top photo is the Dysart Road and El Mirage overpasses. And then the photo on the bottom is Southern and Stapley intersection in Mesa. Several other projects were underway, as noted on the screen. And then moving on to the transit lifecycle program, which can be split between the bus and rail side of things. On the bus side, we saw 2 route extensions and 124 vehicle purchases. This includes both replacement and expansion vehicles for both the regular bus transit side, but then paratransit vehicles as well. And then just a caveat that this is Prop 400 funded service only. So Valley Metro has done more than this, but this is what Prop 400 funded. And then on the rail side of things, a number of projects underway, 2 notable extensions, including South Central Extension and the Downtown Hub, as well as the Northwest Extension Phase 2. And then for this next slide, it will zoom out and talk about accomplishments over the entirety of Prop 400, not just on the past fiscal year. A total of 422 corridor miles of freeway projects, totaling over $7.8 billion in investments. We also had 252 corridor miles of arterial projects, which total over $1 billion invested. And then finally, over 118 bus transit revenue miles, totaling over $5 billion invested. I'll pause. You can take a couple photos of that. And then looking forward, our next steps, MAG will continue to review the program and cost estimates, make adjustments as needed. And we look forward to November of 2024, where Proposition 479 will be on the ballot. Yes, 479, it has a name. Chair Osborne, members of the committee, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. And if you do want a copy of the report, it was included in the agenda packet, but we can arrange for printed copies to be delivered to you.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, just a comment. Many people don't know why it now is the new extension will be Proposition 479. It's because that's where it falls in the sequence. And as we were talking about this, we decided that we really needed to just follow the law exactly rather than give anybody the opportunity for additional challenges.
And Mr. Chair, to that point, I'm sure as we head towards 479, one of the first questions many of you will be asked is, well, what did you do with the money for 400? This is exactly the document for that question. It lives online on the MAG website, but as Steph said, we are happy to make copies available to you as you need them. But it is the comprehensive. You want to know what we did? Here you go. It's like, how many pages?
Oh, 282, I think.
It's a lot to comply with the law, but also it's the information that says, yes, exactly. We did what we said we would do and more with Prop 400s.
That's awesome. Thank you. Any other comments, Mayor Weiss?
I think as we go forward with this, and obviously we are, Ed, you're exactly right. The success that Prop 400 has had in the Valley and the impact that it's had in the Valley is undeniable. And building upon that success is something we've touted for the last few years. I'm heartened by the elections that we saw 2 weeks ago, a week ago, especially when it came to bond overrides, not every city, but in Phoenix, Goodyear, Surprise. I think that tells us, without taking it for granted, that the public will invest in infrastructure. It'll invest in improvements in the region. And I think we need to build off that.
Yep, agreed. Well said. Any other comments from anyone in the room? Anyone online, comments on agenda item 8? Mayor of Goodyear. Yeah. Well, yeah, let's keep that one going.
No.
All right, this is just information and discussion. Steph, thank you very much and
Thank
great
you, Mr. Chair.
presentation. Congratulations to MAG and the region on the success from Prop 400. All right, item number 9, legislative update. Number 9 is on the agenda for information and discussion. MAG Executive Director Ed Zerker will present the update.
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, with an action by the Executive Committee on Monday, we have authority to negotiate a contract with a new state lobbying services contractor. As you know, Policy AZ, which was John McDonald and Dana Paschke, they decided that as many years as they served us was enough, and they were not going to renew the contract. And so with no hard feelings on either side. So we did go out for a bid, and on Monday we were authorized to negotiate with Tri-Advocates as the state lobbying services. They went through a process, interview panel with almost a dozen intergovs from around the region, and were selected as the best respondent. And now we're going to negotiate the contract with them.
Great. Any comments from the committee? Seeing none. On the legislative update also, and I think I can't remember if we met, I think we met before the county supervisors made the vote to push what is now Prop 479 onto the public for a vote. And Supervisor Sellers, who's here with us today, this has been like a lifelong work, I know, for you in transportation and funding for transportation. And I know it must have felt really, really good to make the vote at with the county supervisors to push this along to the public. So congratulations on that. And thank you for all of your hard work in getting us to where we are in the Valley.
Well, thank you. And the point I made when we voted on that is that's a major hurdle, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us to ensure that we get this passed, because we've got far too much at stake with our economic expansion going on in this region to not get this passed.
Yep. Well said. All right, on to item 10, request for future agenda items. Are there any requests by a TPC member for an item on a future agenda? And I'm seeing and hearing none. Number 11, comments from the committee. Any comments or announcements from the membership?
Yes.
Yes, Mayor Gagnon.
We lost former Phoenix Mayor Thelda Williams overnight. She last represented Phoenix before I did in this body and was a great advocate for our transit system. She also chaired Valley Metro and our transportation system in general. So we will honor her many times, but the first will be this Friday afternoon at Metro Center where the transit station bears her name.
Wow, I hadn't heard that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. The next meeting of the Transportation Policy Committee will be on Wednesday, January 24th at 11:30 a.m. with no further business.